On January 8th, 1993, on a chilly winter's day, 40 miles north of Chicago in a town called Palatine, Illinois, 5 employees and 2 managers, who were also the owners, went to work and never returned home from their shift. The horrific events that took place that day would not be resolved or solved for 9 years. The loved ones in Palatine never let the city or anyone else forget what happened to their loved ones. An American success story for the ages was Brown's Chicken. From a small town, family ran eatery in Bridgeville, Illinois, it eventually expanded and became very popular. It had about 300 locations throughout 13 states. Most of it was in Chicago in the metropolitan area. And one day, Brown's Chicken would become nationally known, not for the delicious food they served, but for the diabolical behavior of others. On January 8th, 1993, 2 males walked inside of a Brown's Chicken restaurant. The restaurant was located on 168 West Northwest Highway in the city of Palatine, Illinois. It was pretty close to closing time. It was almost 9 o'clock. They walked up to the counter and they each ordered a box of chicken. The box included chicken, coleslaw, and fries. They sat down at the booth adjacent to the garbage can and they enjoyed their meal. When they were done, they got up. They each pulled out a pair of latex gloves and put them on. One of the thieves pulled out a snub-nosed Smith & Wesson and approached the first employee, Rico Salas. He was mopping the floor. The thief told him that he needed to go to the back of the restaurant, and the second thief shot in the air to let the other employees know that the restaurant was being robbed. During this, commotion broke out. There was panic. The employees were afraid. One of them tried to run. He jumped over the counter, but before he can get away, he was carted off to the back of the restaurant and placed in a cooler with restaurant owner Richard Ehlenfeld, who had been shot. Several gunshots were fired, and that sound came from the cooler. One of the thieves grabbed Lynn. She was also co-owner, and she was Richard's wife. He grabbed her by the neck and he put a knife to her and he told her to go in the safe and take all the money out and give it to them. Once she gave them the money, he took that knife and he slit her throat. He dragged her body to the back of the restaurant and put her inside of one of the refrigerators. The remaining 4 workers were ordered to the back of the restaurant and they were forced inside of one of the refrigerators. They pleaded and they cried and they asked the robbers not to kill them, and their cries were ignored. The refrigerator was shot into repeatedly. The thieves made off with less than $2,000. A couple hours after closing time, Michael Castro's parents called the Palatine Police Department and asked them to do a wellness check. They said that their son hadn't come home from work. It was a couple of hours past the closing time and his usual time that he would make it home. They had been calling the restaurant and there was no answer. And the police officer said that they would. But they didn't. A short time later, Palatine Police Department received another phone call. This time it was from Guadalupe Maldando's wife. And she was telling police that, hey, my husband hasn't come home. It's like 5 hours later, and normally he would have been home. He's never out this late. When he's working, he comes home by now. When the police station get the second phone call, they decide that maybe they should follow up on it and just do a wellness check. So they drive out to the restaurant. They get there, it's dark. Doesn't seem to be anything going on. They check the front door and it's locked. They drive around the parking lot and they see one of the employees' cars still parked there. The wife had reported that. So they go to the back door and they check the back door and it's open. The two officers enter the restaurant and they're looking around and it's dark. They don't see any employees. So they decide to look a little further. Upon further investigation, one of the officers notices there's blood on the floor of the restaurant. So now the both officers are looking around and trying to figure out where the source of the blood came from. So now they're looking. There's blood. Where's the blood coming from? They checked all the areas behind the counter. They checked behind the seats. And one of them said, we need to check the coolers. When an officer opened the cooler, nothing on this earth could have prepared him for what he would witness and what he would see. He witnessed in front of him 5 bodies laying there, deceased. There were a few facing forward, and there were a couple facing down, laying on their stomachs. Michael Castro, Rico Salas were both high school students that attended Palatine High School. They were just working part-time trying to earn extra money. Thomas Menez and also Marcus Nelson were also present in the cooler. While the first officer checked the first cooler, the second officer went to the second cooler. He saw 2 bodies, Richard and Lynn Ehlenfeld, who were the owners of the business. And they were both deceased along with the other 5 victims. During the investigation, it was discovered that the couple had 2 daughters that were working that night, but they were not present during the murders. Had they been present, there would have been 9 victims instead of 7. Dr. Jane Homier noticed a receipt at the register that said that there had been a purchase at 9:08 p.m. And this was kind of strange considering the restaurant closed at 9 o'clock and they figured the murders had happened not too far after that. She decided to look further. She went and looked in a trash can. And when she looked in a trash can, she saw a fresh bag, but noticed a cardboard box with a 4-piece chicken dinner scattered all over the garbage can. There were fries, biscuits, coleslaw, and other paper products, chicken parts, and bones. She collected those bones, put them in a bag, and preserved them for future evidence. The doctor was sharp. Back in 1993, forensic DNA testing did not exist. Prior to this incident, Palatine was a quiet area, virtually unheard of. It was a place where you went and you raised your family. It was the suburbs. So in the suburbs, unlike the inner cities, it's quiet. It's not a lot of fast-paced moving. Although it was not a small town, it had a small town feel to it. In the early 90s, there were many fads that came and went, and Palatine, like all other areas, joined in on those fads. Some of those fads were beanie bears and the piercings. People were wearing overalls like crazy. The troll dolls, the oxygen bar, and many others. 9 years came and went in a blink of an eye, and the citizens of Palatine would gently remind the rest of the world that these murders had not been solved. They would get this information out into the media as much as possible, especially around an anniversary date each year. Them just kind of putting it out there that they still needed people to come forward and give information to the police to help them solve what the media dubbed the massacre of Brown's Chicken. In March of 2002, more than 9 years after the Brown chicken murders. Ann Lockett came forward and implicated her former boyfriend, James Degurski. She also implicated his associate, Juan Luna. She said that Luna at the time was 18 years old and that he was a former employee at the restaurant. In April of 2002, the Palatine Police Department were able to match Luna's saliva with a piece of chicken that had been partially eaten that the investigator had taken out the garbage can in 1993. The chicken had been frozen for evidence, but as a result of the chicken being unthawed a couple of times in order to get evidence samples, the defense tried to use the thawing of the chicken as a basis for an argument. They said that the unthawing of the chicken could have possibly caused contamination from the environment. On May 16, 2002, Luna and Degurski were picked up by the Palatine Police Department. They were brought in for questioning. During that questioning, Luna confessed. He says that he did it, but later he would try to recant his story through his attorney. He claimed at that time that the police interrogated him, he was under duress, he had sleep deprivation, and that he wasn't in his right state of mind during the questioning with police. Ellen Bakaya, who was the friend of Degurski, was called as a witness and told a horrific story of a confession by Degurski. Ellen says that the confession came hours after the murders happened. She says that Luna and Degurski came to her house and she gave them a ride home. She said the first she dropped Luna off, and when it was just her and Degurski in the car, he told her to drive past the Brown's Chicken. When he saw all the police cars there, he confessed and he told her everything in detail. She says she could not believe the brutality that these two had committed. According to Ellen, she claimed that Degurski told her Luna was the main perpetrator of the crime. She says he instigated the whole thing. She says that Degurski did confess to her that he had pulled the trigger. The day that this happened, on January 8th, 1993, that Juan allegedly went ballistic. He started killing people. She told the jurors that Juan had a knife and that he used that weapon to slit the throat of Judy, the co-owner of Brown's Chicken, from ear to ear. Ellen says that during the confession, she was told that Juan had the four employees go inside of a cooler and he shot them. He then gave the gun to Degurski, who killed the remaining two. On May 10th, 2007, Juan Luna was found guilty of all 7 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On May 17th, 2007, the state sought the death penalty. It was available at that time. They had an 11-1 vote. They had one juror who decided that he didn't agree or she didn't agree. And because of that, they were not able to implement it. In 2009, the second defendant, James Degurski, was found guilty on all 7 counts of murder also. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Luna and Degurski were both sentenced to the Illinois Department of Corrections Stateville Prison, located in Joliet, Illinois. In March of 2014, a jury awarded James Degurski $450,000 in compensation and punitive damages. He was allegedly beaten by a sheriff's deputy that worked at the Cook County Jail back in May of 2002. He suffered facial fractures and required surgery. The deputy was eventually dismissed from his job. There are a few discrepancies in Degurski and Luna's stories, but the bottom line is they both played a part in it. They did it together, they were co defendants, and they killed those innocent people. So it doesn't matter about the small details. The point is, they did it, and they will never again walk the streets of Illinois or any state as free men.